Hello, happy Monday. Rhode Island. Wow, that's nice and far. Welcome. I wonder who else is here. I would love to know. So if you would like and you're able, send a little comment. Tell me where you're from, where you're listening from today. Also, tell me if you have a question or topic. I always forget to reread the posts. I think there was something about postpartum on there. Oh, cool. Oklahoma, Southeast Iowa, Sweden. Awesome. You get the award, Sweden being the most far. Well, in this country, Taos, hey, Madeline, Josie, so nice to see all of you. In this country today, we have Memorial Day. So that is a holiday. There was no trash pickup this morning, no mail, kind of the typical holiday vibes out, lots of traffic here, lots of people out. And I don't know how it will affect this Midwife Monday today. Maybe people are out. Spain, how exciting. It's so nice to see you. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if people are out barbecuing. Isn't that what people do on Memorial Day? I don't know, because I don't really do that, and I don't know of anybody doing that personally today. It's quite warm here, as it always is in Sedona. So we are doing our countdown, and let's see, how many Mondays do I have left before we move? It's a great question. 1, 2, 3. So after today, 3 more Midwife Mondays until we get to our new place. And then I'm probably going to take a little summer break there. We'll encourage all of you to do the same. Maybe we can talk about that in one of the next Midwife Mondays, just self-care kind of stuff and how to regroup, how to re-nourish yourself and energize yourself after a big event like a move. But it could easily be applied to doing birth work. I feel really lucky right now that I'm not attending births. That would be hard. And yeah, I'd have a much harder time just taking care of my basic needs right now of sleep and, time alone kind of stuff. Rumi had a really bad night of sleep. So we were up early. And then I went back to sleep, and it just kind of made the morning weird. I don't know if anybody else likes morning routines, but I'm definitely more of a morning person as opposed to an evening person. So I don't mind getting up early, and I have things I want to do, and I hike and all of that before it gets too hot. Today was cleaning day in our house, so we had everybody up to clean the house. So there was, whoops, that kind of did something weird there. Yeah, so that was my morning. It was a little weird. I was not prepared for not sleeping and then going back to sleep and all of that. And by the time I get home later, it probably is going to be a little too hot to hike, at least for the dogs. So I don't know. My day just got to be weird, but that's me. I hope you're having a great day. And if it's Memorial Day where you are, then maybe you're enjoying your family more today, or I don't know what. Hello, Massachusetts. That's amazing. We have such a nice group of people here. I recognize so many of you, of course, every week, and then there's always some new people. It really would be fun to make this Midwife Monday event grow a little bit more, though. Not quite sure what my ideas are there at the moment, and I probably should wait until I take a little break, I think in July, and then we're going to regroup here in August. So maybe I'll come up with some brilliant ideas to getting more people here and making it even more fun. I know people watch the replays But it's always nice to have more people on live because you have questions. So circumcision is one we could hit on today. Pain in labor, that's also another one. Thank you. 13 Moons, our childbirth course. I think most of you probably have taken it or are in there, but it's indiebirth.org/13 moons, the number 13 moons. And that's still a pay what you can. I, of course, think it's the best birth course that anybody could be in. And being able to donate whatever you can makes it more accessible, obviously, and also it makes it more shareable. So people are, I think, much more likely to share it with everyone, you know, that new pregnant woman you met at the grocery store or, you know, somebody's 18-year-old daughter that found out she was pregnant. Like there's no reason, I think, not to recommend it to everybody. And there's all kinds of topics in there. So I feel like pain and labor definitely is in there in one way or another. But we might get to talking about it a little bit. I feel like I should shut some things down here. I don't know what's going on with the internet. Maybe nothing. So many things open. I'm going to pick a card for us, as I typically do, and see what comes out in that way for me and for all of you. Since you're here, it's definitely for you too. Oh, sweet. Good fortune. And it even matches my earrings. How nice is that? Such a pretty card. Good fortune. What a nice message. So maybe it's coming your way. Maybe it's already here. Maybe you're living and experiencing good vibes and good fortune today. Maybe it's just a reminder that we can always see good fortune if we look for it. And that might be for me. Just this past weekend, packing things up is not an easy task. I mean, it's not hard, of course, physically, really. But there's definitely been some moments of like overwhelm. So where is the blessing in that? I think there definitely is one. And in dealing with my kids too lately around this move, they're not necessarily choosing to see this all as a good fortune event. And it's not really up to me how they do see it, but I think it's perception. I'm super excited. And I feel like following this spirit-led journey that we're on, I mean, and that's for everyone. I think we're all on one, but we're on one in particular right now to head to this new place. It has been super blessed already, and we're not even there. And I've shared that on a podcast, many of them probably. So there is something very good fortune about the whole thing. And I trust that the good fortune will continue to shine upon us and lead us there. So I don't know that the little book has anything else to say about good fortune. Prosperity, unexpected gift, a reward not necessarily earned. So if that means anything to you, then it's for you. And if it doesn't, then maybe it's not. Okay, well, pain and labor. Okay, well, maybe we have to talk. That's two of you now. That's really funny and synchronistic, and I'll tell you why. I was supposed to talk on someone else's podcast today about labor pain. Isn't that funny? Not funny. And anyway, it didn't work out, which is not weird because I wasn't feeling it. In fact, when this podcast asked me to talk, I remember saying to my husband, is it a waste of time to talk on other people's podcasts? And I've never thought that before because it's always been fun and feels valuable, you know? But this particular one, I was like, But I booked a time anyway, and then the person canceled it when I was already here at 8:30 in the morning. I was pretty annoyed actually. But the message is I just wasn't supposed to be on that podcast, probably ever, because I'm not rescheduling. And I wasn't supposed to talk about labor pain. I don't know why. So maybe I was supposed to save it to talk about it here with you all. So I had been thinking about it. I don't really prepare for those kind of chats, but I was obviously just like last night thinking, oh boy, I mean, it's such a big thing. Yeah, there's the podcast episode, if you haven't heard that. And Dahlia, that might be of interest to you. It's called How I Rewired My Brain. Something about labor pain, can't even remember, but that's my podcast. So Taking Back Birth, indiebirth.org/podcast archives. You can find it there. And so sure, I'll start with that since you brought it up. I recorded that podcast after my 9th baby was born. And it was one of the experiences where I felt like I learned a lot personally in my own body about the sensations of labor. Because even by coming out of the gate, calling it pain, we've already classified it. We've already decided, even culturally decided that birth is painful. So if we teach women that, or if that's the teaching in our cultures, then the next natural question of any smart woman would be, how do I deal with that? How do I deal with this pain? So I think the first question that I always pose to women that I'm working with is just, how do you want to experience this? Because you'll have your own experience, and something as humans we really haven't gotten very good at, I don't think, is communicating, our own felt bodily sensations and being able to compare them to others. Like, we kind of can't do that. So on one hand, there's a lot of birth education out there, and we can think we know what birth might feel like, and that can be useful, stories and such. But on the other hand, we completely don't know, even from birth to birth, sometimes, what it actually will be interpreted as in our bodies. And so pain is often a choice. And if that sounds, sort of judgmental, many of you know that my last birth, my 10th baby, was extremely painful. And I can laugh about it in the irony, right? Because here I had this really painless birth. I recorded this podcast, and I super believe everything that I shared there. Some of these questions: what is pain? How do I want to experience it? What are some techniques for sinking into the sensations? And then bam, the universe gifted me with an extremely painful birth. So, all's to say that I don't know that I know anything about it other than what I've experienced and seen other women experience. I think we can prepare in all the ways, and sometimes we get what we want, and sometimes we don't, on both sides of the coin, and there's valuable lessons in all of it. It's really hard to sum up, So if you're preparing for birth, I guess I'll go back to where I started. Why would you assume that there's pain? And some people just really need to know more about how the process works to be able to disengage from this idea that our bodies are going to have a hard time, right? Because, oh, you have this baby moving through this small space. Well, once you look into the science a little bit more, how does the uterus work? How do contractions work? It really does instill the belief that we were made to do this and that it doesn't have to be painful. There might be other words. I mean, intense is sometimes a word that I think I would use. There is an intensity sometimes to the sensations, but pain in particular definitely doesn't have to be experienced. So I do think mulling this stuff over well before you're in the birth process would be helpful. It's not just you're convincing yourself, oh, it's not going to be painful. You have to replace it with something. So when I feel the sensation of my uterus contracting, how do I want to interpret that? What if that felt really good to my body? And pleasure is a huge topic, orgasmic birth, but I think there's such a strong focus on the orgasmic part, and that feels, sexual to people, and birth is sexual, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be that kind of pleasure. So women that are like, oh my God, women orgasm during birth, either that's ridiculous or I want to be one of those people. Yes, that can happen, but that's sort of the extreme in my experience. There's so many ways that our bodies interpret pleasure that is not sexual. Just feeling good, having an oxytocin release, getting a back rub, having your feet rubbed. Like there's so many ways that our bodies can sink into physical sensations and just say, this feels great. I'm not going to fight it. And I think that's one of the key principles that has helped me over the years is preparing to surrender, because clenching up and fighting anything, even if it's a back rub, it's not going to feel so great. But there's so much under there for a lot of women. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it can be done in a day. But there's other associations with physicality and or other words and other thoughts, other emotions associated with what our bodies are feeling. Easy for everybody to just say, oh, I'm going to choose that this feels good. For some women it is, especially if they've experienced birth before. It's like, oh yeah, I know what that feels like for the most part. This time I'm just not going to fight it. And that was a lot of what I came to for myself. How much energy was I putting into kind of like holding on, because I knew I could get through it. What if I reserve that energy to enjoy it and just let it happen? And that was Cove's birth. Honest to goodness. I mean, I'm so grateful to have had that experience, because I have all kinds of experiences now. But that one in particular, you can read the story, you can listen to the podcast, you can watch her video. The Indie Birth of Cove River is the name of the story. I was just listening to music. I was really enjoying it. And that was another intention. So my intention was to enjoy the sensations rather than fear them, rather than pinch myself, rather than run away from them. Just how can I enjoy this? If this is the last baby I have, which of course it wasn't, but if this is the last baby I have, I really just want to enjoy it. It's all going to be over quickly, and that's my choice. So I did that, and she really just kind of fell out. Like, I would not say it was painful. And then I remember the moment when I looked into the mirror in my bathroom. I was alone in my bathroom, in my room, laboring. And I knew she was coming out. And then she came out, and none of it was painful. So it's totally possible. And I had had many birth experiences, obviously, 8 prior to that, where I would say I experienced varying degrees of pain, varying degrees of intensity. And I have had the unique blessing of having that many babies. So each time, and some people can do it in 2 births, but it took me, this many to kind of chip away at some of the psychology, how I did fear certain parts of the process. And for me, it was always like not the opening of my body, but the baby kind of dropping in. That was a part that I still had some fear around and was kind of wrapped up in and was anticipating not in a positive way. So I think it is definitely education. How does the body work? Do you believe we are set up to do this? Do you understand how to make it as pain-free as possible? Because that's a whole other topic in 13 Moons, and we have lots of podcasts about. If we're feeling safe, if we're feeling loved, if we're feeling like nobody's watching us and timing us and there aren't bright lights on us, we are mammals. So there's a million ways that our bodies can just have an easier time. We don't have to have pain that comes from the reaction to external circumstances. And a lot of pain in birth does come from that. And that could be outside fear. That could be, like I said, feeling watched, having to get in the car and go to the hospital, being in the hospital, having all these people staring at you, have bright lights on. All of these things take us out of our animal brain. And when we're out of our animal brain into our mental brain, then our bodies interpret the sensations possibly very differently because our normal hormonal flow is disrupted. So if that's a new topic to anybody, you definitely should take 13 Moons. There really is so much to learn to reprogram ourselves as to what normal physiological birth looks like. That's the first step. That's the absolute first step. And I always say, I did have a hospital birth. I had a hospital birth with my first. I didn't have any pain medication, but I see why people would, especially in that setting, because, you just really can't be an animal. And when you're more in your animal body, then you're less likely to be affected by all of the other things. And there's just simple blood flow, right? So when we're afraid, then our blood flow in our bodies isn't going just to our uterus and our baby, which is ideal. That's the way it should be in labor, or, not all, but that's where a good deal of the blood flow should go. And it's diverted, right? So it's diverted to our heart, to our brain, if our body thinks that we're scared. So we're learning a lot about birth to create the optimum situation for our labors so that we are not bathed in fear, whether it's our own or someone else's. And that, I think, is, if I had to give a number one recommendation for pain relief, it would be that. However, as has been shared here, and as I have also seen at many home births, including some of my own, that doesn't mean that pain doesn't show up in home births, right? If it was that easy, more people might be into home birth. I think it's a huge piece, though, having your own space, you calling the shots, feeling comfortable, having a supportive birth team that doesn't bully you, all of those things. But yes, there will still be women that have a really hard time at home in their physical bodies. And I think, I don't know the exact answer. I'll throw out some ideas. I think the first thing is that culturally, we are taught there is pain in birth, and that doesn't just get erased overnight or sometimes in a 9-month period. I think the indoctrination is deep, that our bodies are dysfunctional, they are to be feared. Even monthly bleeding is not something we accept as a sacred process. So we can't just put a woman in her home and expect she will have worked all of these deep, deep emotional issues out, some of which are not even hers personally. So I'm talking about the cultural stuff. And as someone, Dahlia, mentioned, our ancestry, our bloodline, generations and generations of women well, not tons of generations at this point that experience medicalized birth, but we do have that, all of us in our history, pretty much. And then before that, I don't know. I really don't know. But I think birth trauma has always been a part of the picture for women. So yes, how many generations are we suppressing their experiences, particularly surgical births, women that really feel like they maybe failed in the birth process, our mothers, our grandmothers, and then that's passed down to us. And we really don't even have the tools sometimes to look at those things because we don't know they're there or we don't know how to work on them. It's just so deep. So again, we get to labor, we think that, because we're in our home, because we chose a midwife, it's going to be pain-free. And I definitely do not want to paint that picture either. So in the beginning of this conversation, I said, yes, I think we can choose if we're going to interpret the sensations as pain. I do believe that, but I also think it's unrealistic to not have the other side of the conversation, especially with first-time moms, and say, I don't know how your body will interpret this. We're going to do all this work together. We're going to have these conversations. But the truth is, you get what you get in birth. And I wouldn't want anyone to go into it thinking that all babies fall out and there is never any pain and it should be easy all of the time. It's not that way. It can be that way. But there's also experiences that are hard. Birth can be hard. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. It doesn't mean that your birth will be hard. I have no idea. But birth can be hard. Doesn't mean we don't get through it. Doesn't mean we don't still have the experience we want. But we have to be prepared for anything too. I really do think so. And the baby is a huge piece of that. So I don't think we should be so arrogant to, think that if we're just doing our piece as women, that is a very important piece for sure. But there's another soul involved here, right? There's another soul involved that has a path, that has a life purpose, that has lessons to probably learn and to teach. And so I think we need to respect the process and the passenger, right? All the good textbooks call the baby the passenger, which is kind of funny because they kind of are, but they're also so instrumental in how this experience pans out. So I guess, that was my personal experience here too with my last baby. I've birthed many babies. I'm not scared of birth. And actually so he was born on a Sunday. On the Friday, this labor began, if you don't know the story. And I felt very, very proud of myself with how I was dealing with it. I've done this before. I feel like I've figured out the, psychological kind of loops for myself. And I was really enjoying it. It was not a big deal. And I thought, this is moving along. And probably in another hour, I'll have a baby and it'll be just like my last birth. It'll just be like, cool, did it, and it's done. Well, I suppose I needed to be humbled and taught a lot of things. And I really am so grateful for that. But it was not that way. So when it came time for him to come out, it was incredibly wrong. And he was in a terrible position and he was not coming out. So I got to experience pain from something being wrong. So that's another conversation is, we talk about pain as if it's just this like one thing and it's always, wrong in a sense, or like we should get rid of our pain or we shouldn't have fears and then we won't have pain. But in the end, sometimes pain is a message that there is something not quite right. And if I hadn't birthed as many babies as I had, I don't know if I would have gotten the message either, but I very clearly knew for me that that pain was because something was wrong. And that, caused me to make certain decisions, take certain actions, and in the end, not feel bad about it. Like there was nothing I did wrong. It simply was mechanics, which, yes, there's emotions in there, there's the spiritual path. So I'm not saying birth is just mechanics, but the pain was being caused by the mechanics. And I accepted that. I accepted that as my path. And it led to, the way the birth looked, essentially. So had I ignored the pain, I don't know, how I would have ignored it. But let's say that was my first birth. Maybe I would have felt really bad. Like I just couldn't handle it. And I had such a low pain tolerance. And how do women do this? I could have, if it had been my first birth, gone down that whole road of kind of like guilt and shame. But I can tell you, no, pain meant something was wrong. So I think when we're attending home births, Maritzel, I think you had started this conversation. Who are we to say that that's not true, right? With a woman and her experience. Yes, on the midwifery side, we can check things out. Maybe we can feel what her body's doing on the inside. We can check for what the baby's doing, how the head is molded, assuming it's a head, what station the baby's at. We can listen to the baby's heart tones. Is the baby tolerating labor? All of the things. But in the end, we don't actually know. And if somebody truly feels like they can't tolerate the pain and they say to me at their birth, I absolutely cannot do this anymore, I want to go to the hospital, then I think by all means, they should go. Side note, women do say that sometimes. And so, that's sometimes a judgment call. But one of the last births I attended was like that. She was like, I want to go. And I said, okay, let's pack your bag. And then she ended up pushing out her baby on the bathroom floor. So, we're flexible. We don't hold people to that, but an openness around this, not like, oh, well, you said you wanted a home birth, you have to stay home. No, you can remind people, well, when you go to the hospital, here's what might happen. You probably won't have time for an epidural. And, if you're going for pain relief and that's it, and you don't feel like anything's wrong, then that's a toss up because you can probably have this baby here. So I definitely think there's some good conversations in there. But if someone is having a super hard time, then it's not our call to make other than serving them how they're asking to be served, having some of those conversations, which can be hard in the moment of labor, conversations around fear, surrender, sinking into the sensations, letting it happen. These are things that can be hard if someone is really holding back, especially in an emotional way. Maybe they have sexual abuse, maybe you didn't know that as the midwife. Those are some of the situations where it can be really hard for someone to follow any of that advice. And in the end, they're going to have the experience they need to have. So I definitely love the conversation about pain. How can we support people more? Really, how can we educate them more? So that they can kind of like make their own map to their birth process. And then, like I said, in the moment, if we're the midwife, we pull out the tools we have, all kinds of things, counter pressure, get in the tub, let's do the rebozo, let's get you to rest. If you're not hydrated, if you're not getting calories, the pain can be worse because your body is running on empty. So there's so many pieces to bring to the table. It's the woman's experience and it's the baby's experience. And I really, really do believe that we get what we need. So I don't know if that sums it up well enough. Oh, thank you, Mayetta, Jessica, Patty. Yeah, listening. Thank you, Patty. Listen. If you're the one that's birthing, it doesn't matter. If you have the best midwife in the world, it doesn't matter if you've had 9 babies already. just listen to what your body needs and stay calm as you can. You have the tools. I think all of us have the tools inside of ourselves to navigate the birth experience in one way or another. So I can think of one birth of mine. It was my third. And actually, it wasn't painful because my first two were babies in the posterior position, both of them. And I thought that was normal birth. Like for me, that was normal birth. So it was painful, but I was just like, well, I guess that's how it feels to have a baby. Little did I know that the position sucked really bad. And it all worked out, but that was my interpretation of that. So with my third birth, she wasn't posterior. It was my first birth where the baby was in a good anterior position. And I thought it was really not hard because it was so different. Instead of feeling all of the sensations and the pain in my back, it was in the front, like a more typical labor. So it was actually pretty enjoyable. But anyway, the point I'm getting to is I remember that it was intense for sure. And I was like staring at the wall while I was having contractions. I was in the pool and I just kept focusing on like this one little paint chip or something in the wall. And that's how I got through. Like I would just breathe and keep looking at it and whatever I did. So call it whatever you want, pain, intensity, waves, rushes, whatever. But you will need to most likely come up with some kind of self plan to do it. I think we all do that in one way or another, even if it's listening to music or, dancing, finding out that moving our body during a contraction is how we cope. So as Margot and I would say, they're kind of like natural coping methods, right? Self-coping. We really can learn a lot from education. We can learn a lot from other people's stories. But in the heat of the moment, you're going to do what you need to do. And for me, it always felt like, just staying under the intensity, because the intensity can really grow, right? From one part of labor to the next, and just kind of staying under it until you can. And then for me, it's always felt like there's a moment of real surrender, like a real cracking, like call that pain if you want to, but I think it's bigger than that in a sense. It's like a blowing open of yourself, at one point, probably when the baby's getting close. So for me, it was not fearing that and just accepting that I don't have to call that pain, but I can acknowledge the bigness of it. I can acknowledge that is like my universe shifting. That is my old self dying. So, I don't think we have to make it all, as I always say, rainbows and unicorns. I think we can appreciate the initiation that birth is every time and come up with new words that represent what that might be to us. And again, maybe hold firm in how we want to experience it while we also stay open to the way the universe needs to work through us for this birth and the way our baby needs to work through us for this birth. Again, having been through it myself, I'll say again, it was extremely humbling to have that experience. And I'm so glad I did, because I might think that I was, that I should have been more in control of how I wanted that experience to be. But I know without a doubt that kind of initiation was what I needed. I didn't need another painless birth. I needed this kind. And it's shifted my whole entire life. So it's that big. Going through the birth process is that big. And as a midwife, I really think it's just our job to hold space, to have the tools, to have the knowledge to support. And most women will do it. Most women will do it at home in the way they imagined, and then some won't. And, I don't think there's any judgment over that at all. It's all exactly as it needs to be. Yeah. So have a baby or two or three. And if you get to experience some of the variations of fetal position, also the variations of membranes being open or not. That's another, I think, crucial ingredient in how our bodies interpret sensations. At least it has been for me. So if your waters are open or not, and to what degree, has definitely affected what it feels like in my body. So how do we prepare for that? I don't know. We just know that we can do it, that we can find the way to surrender to it. And you know what? If we feel like we don't surrender, like we don't have Enya playing in the candles and we scream all the way through and that's how the baby comes out, then that's how the baby comes out. So there's no shame in doing this exactly the way you need to do it, and not thinking it needs to be quiet or blissful or even painless. Maybe pain is a part of the story, and it should be for people in various situations. So it was for me, and I'm glad it was, because I learned so much. And yeah, I just got the experience of it. So maybe that's the place. We'll come all the way back to the beginning with the question, which is, why is pain a bad thing? Maybe it's not. And maybe it does serve a purpose. And maybe that's where we get to know ourselves. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Mayra, Felicia, Jessica. Yeah, I don't have better words either. I don't have better words for some of those moments, right? So we're trying to reduce, and not you all, but like, we can't really reduce the experience of birth to these words sometimes, because it's so much bigger than that. And a birth that, wasn't painful for one woman could have maybe felt traumatic in ways we don't understand, right? And then on the flip side, someone that had something they felt was really painful, they got through it, right? And they're so proud of themselves and they feel just like an absolute queen. So I think all of these conversations are helpful, though. And again, in walking with women, it's just this like, let's talk about it. Let's see where you're at. Let's see what we can uncover. But there are no guarantees. There's no recipe for a perfect birth. I mean, what does that even mean, right? There are no recipes for totally orchestrating this experience. And I think, I don't know that I wish there were. I think that's the beauty and the mystery of birth that we all sign up for, whether it's personally or in walking with other women. That's what we're signing up for. We're signing up for the unknown. Yeah, so many good comments. Yeah, and I will say, I think not every birth, of course, will happen, right? It's just pure statistics, really. Not every birth will happen at home. Not every birth will happen in the way we imagine it, because we, in doing this work with passion, of course, we know why undisturbed birth at home is so crucial for humanity. So of course we want that. We want that for everybody, but that's not everybody's path. And I think opening ourselves up to accepting those challenges with women as we walk with them makes it less likely that they will feel, especially if things don't turn out exactly the way they wanted, that they failed, because I don't think that's helpful. That doesn't make powerful women. It doesn't pay to feel like just because you didn't, do X, Y, or Z, or have a free birth or whatever it is, that you somehow are less of a woman. And I'm not saying anyone here believes that, but I think there is that stigma out there as well. It's less about our internal power and decision making and intuition, the listening that we talked about. It's less about that on some days than it is like the label. So pain definitely factors into that. And that said, I think there are women that maybe don't want to even birth at home, and I can think of some, maybe someone's had an epidural for their first birth, or maybe 2 births in a row, and then they want a home birth, and they're really surprised by the sensations. They're really surprised by all of that. And maybe it's right for them to, be at home. Maybe it's not. I don't know. It's not. My stories are my stories. your stories are your stories. And when we're supporting people, it's their story. So, don't take it personally if someone feels like they don't want to be at home or it's so painful. I'm sure we all do everything we can do, but in the end, of course, you can't do it for someone. And I think that's a lesson that most midwives, for sure, midwives learn. Doulas probably learned it too, somewhere along the line. You can't want it more than someone, and you certainly can't do it for them. So sometimes it just, works out the way it works out. Yeah, I think Maricel, like I said, in a situation where someone's maybe had sexual abuse or, there are a lot of things. That's just like the most glaring one where women can have a really hard time opening up. Not being supported by a partner, fear in general. Like I said, maybe they don't really want a home birth. They thought they did. They did in their head, but when it comes time to it, their bodies don't lie. They feel safer somewhere else. And I've totally been in those situations with women where it's like, hey, don't feel shame around where you feel safest. Like, I know you thought you would want to be here, but if you would feel safer there, then go do it. And then, like I said, if it's not that, then okay, how can we help you? How can we help you realize that this is really what you want? And working with people every step along the way. And some labors are like that. You really are there every step along the way. People need a lot of support. They need hands-on support. And that's how they do it. Yes. Out of our control, Valerie. That's the best way to say it. It's out of our control. So what do we have control over? Whether we're the birthing woman or the midwife, there are some things. And then what do we not? And I think that's a great conversation too. Because if people really think they have like 500% control over all of it, life, death, that's kind of a problem, for me. I that's kind of a problem to work with someone that feels like that's the way it goes. And I think there are people. Yeah, that's a huge one. And I could count probably all the transports I've ever had. Most of them have been first-time moms, right? Honestly. But probably like 85% of them are for that kind of reason, which is she didn't really want it deep down. Maybe someone else wanted it more. Maybe no one else wanted it. But that's when people are tested. So again, it's a great conversation. Is it really about pain then? Or is it about being in the wrong place, not having a vibrational match between the woman and her body, or the woman and the setting, or the woman and the birth team? I think there's a lot of things that can get out of sync there that aren't good matches. And yeah, it just winds up that someone's really in pain and tired. I'll leave you with an uplifting story, I think. Let me take a drink. Well, and I thought of this story actually this weekend because we're having a going away party here in Sedona before we leave. So I was inviting like all kinds of people, clients from a long, long, long time ago. And so it was fun when some of them got back to me who I haven't talked with in a really long time. And so one of my favorite clients, but I haven't talked to her in, 8 years or something, just because life, and they moved away. But anyway, her first birth was with a licensed midwife here. And it was kind of like what you're describing, I think, Maricel, from her description. I wasn't there. So super long, super painful, and ended up going to the hospital. I can't remember if she had an epidural or not, but she did have a vaginal birth. So with her second baby, I was her midwife for her second. And, all of these conversations, really, all of these things. And mostly her just having the anticipation around what if it's that painful again. So months of that, and, how we could maybe help better, or what she could prepare with. Anyway, the second baby pretty much fell out. And that was great. And all of her work seemed like it had really paid off, all her personal work. Happy with that birth and very proud of herself, as she should have been. Then she had a third baby a couple of years later, and that was an extremely hard birth. So her baby ended up coming out with her hand next to her face, and the whole birth was just kind of wacky because of that. It was really long, super painful. One of my babies, my second baby, came out like that. So I could attest to the fact that it's kind of painful, or can be. So anyway, this woman had her third baby at home, and she's not having any more babies. This was a while ago. But it was kind of like a mixed bag, It was like a feather in her cap because she did it. She didn't transfer like she did the first time. It wasn't super easy breezy like the second. She really worked for that third baby. And I know she questioned herself, but it was what was needed. It was her baby's position. The things we tried didn't resolve it, obviously. So the baby came out that way. She actually didn't tear at all or anything. So it was about as, seamless as it could have been. But it was definitely challenging. And I think she would say it was painful, but she did it. So 3 completely different birth experiences for that lady and for many of us. All right, everybody, that ends Midwife Monday here. Thanks for the awesome chat on pain and labor. That was really fun. If you have any ideas for the future, let me know. Find me on our social. And if you're into my witchery class, we start this coming Saturday. So indiebirth.org/witchery101. I think a good deal of you here will be there. So super excited to hang out with you on Saturday. And if you want to still join, there's a couple days left here. But otherwise, I'll see you back here next Monday for Midwife Monday. All right. Have a beautiful week, everybody. Bye.